Don't worry, I hate my talk title too. It's just what sounded good at the time. I know it's not. It's not a good one. I'll be honest. But hey, it's a topic that obviously you care enough about to come and sit and listen to me ramble about. So we'll forget the title and think more about what we're actually talking about. I'm getting over a bit of a cold, so if you hear me sniffling a little bit, if I got a little bit of a cough, I apologize in advance. But I feel like it always happens around conference season, right? So I'm Chris Honda, not that important. I do some security stuff occasionally for a local company called Wistic. Today we're going to be talking about AI risk management. You're going to notice a severe lack of Tightrope related memes, mostly just because I was incapable of finding anything good. But really, what the takeaway for that is, right, you lean too far one way or the other and you're going to end up falling off. So we're going to try and avoid that. So yes, another AI talk. I know we're sick of this. We've had these for 2 years straight. I'm going to be that guy and give one anyways. Standard disclaimers, not going to read it because, I mean, if you were to sue me for saying something dumb, you wouldn't have anything anyways. I have nothing to give you. I'm sorry. What I will say though is I've found good success for this this idea. You all have much better observations, comments, thoughts than I could ever dream to put in a slideshow. So if you have a thought, comment, you want to tell me I'm wrong and would love to explain why, I would love to hear from you. Raise your hand, shout, jump up and down. I have terrible hearing and terrible eyesight, so please be loud. Also, free reign. I mean it, please. Yeah. I do some things, I've done things, nothing that cool. I work at this place. If you really care about some of the other things I did, it's listed here. I've done a lot of things because I'm bad at pretty much everything. But this is what I've done. Oh, what to expect? We will talk about AI related stuff. We're going to talk about risk management. Yay, everyone's favorite stuff, right? Everyone loves a good GRC related presentation. I can't promise much else other than that, though, right? I can't make AI easy for you. I can't make you AI pros because I'm not one myself. You got to go to YouTube and Google and stuff for that. So I also can't tell you how to do it because you're just going to get the famous "it depends" answer, and everyone loves that. Told you I need my meds. All right. I also like to give everyone a chance to leave before we get too far into it, and like I've been. The only thing that I'm really good at selling is for people to not attend my presentations. If you feel like leaving, I encourage you to do that because the other folks that are talking right now have much more compelling topics and are much better speakers. But if you choose to do so, what I hope that you take away from having sat in here the last 3 minutes is AI doesn't have to be scary. The more you understand it, the less scary it's going to be. And the more you try and do things, the better results you'll have over time, right? The only time you stop growing and stop getting better is if you quit trying. So, and take a breath, right? The technology is not going anywhere for better or worse, whether you feel like that's a good thing or not, right? This is something that's going to take time and we're just going to make it work. All right. AI isn't going to make the world like this. I think I might have recycled this from a different talk at some point, right? But technology isn't going to come to this, hopefully. Fingers crossed. The AI isn't going to be the destruction of mankind. Again, hopefully. I can't predict the future. But it's also not going to make the world like this, or as my daughter loves, the rainbows and the unicorns and the sprinkles. Those are sprinkles in the sky for some reason. Yay, go ChatGPT image generation. Right? It's not going to be the savior of the world either. So this is just, right, it would behoove us to start with some balanced expectations of what technology is going to do. I know it's really reductive, but hey, you know what? AI is just software. I know, super reductive. There's going to be some people in other rooms, hopefully, that are really mad about that, but AI is just software, right? So if we take it from that perspective, there's not nearly as much to be scared of. This is one of those new slides I added at like midnight last night, so you got to give me a sec to remember what I'm talking about. Main point, right? If I looked at the screen, it would tell me exactly what we're doing. All right, just because you can doesn't mean you have to. Those of you that came and suffered through my presentation last year know that I'm a big fan of what I like to call the Jurassic Park rule. Less eloquently put, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? There's been a big push recently for companies, for enterprise tooling, for consumer software rather, to say, hey, look, like we're behind the curve on AI. We need to have AI in our tool suite. right? Just because you can doesn't mean you should, doesn't mean you have to, right? Chances are actually, depending on what you're doing, you probably should not. Right? Dr. Malcolm says it a lot more eloquently than I could. But right, if you make the decision to introduce AI, if you have that risk, if you have the risk mindset, you've done any work with risk, you know that introduces a whole nother suite of stuff that you then have to go and deal with. Some people like that. Others like me who are just probably in the wrong industry because we're super risk averse. It gives you a little bit of the anxiety sweats at night. What you maybe want to ask yourself before you dive too far down into the rabbit hole and you want to ask yourself, is it worth it? Right? Why would I want to use AI? A lot of time because this cool new shiny tool ends up being the reasons you hear in those fun meetings that we sit in every Monday. And a lot of times I'd argue, and I hope some of you would agree to some extent, that that's just not enough, right? Using cool new shiny tool and technology is fun. Doesn't mean it's always good, right? You can, doesn't mean you should. Another way to kind of get your mind prepped for that, especially as you get into, okay, how are we going to govern this? How are we going to manage this? How are we going to prepare ourselves for this? Is ask, okay, why wouldn't we want to, right? You look at it from both perspectives and it gives you the insight into, well, you know what? There's just no clear upside. If you can't articulate clearly, hey, this is how it's going to be good for our tool. This is how it's going to be good for our revenue, for our customers. Try the other side and you might be surprised thinking, oh, there's actually lots of reasons why we shouldn't do this. We've been watching a lot of Phineas and Ferb recently, so I take a lot of inspiration for the memes that I use in my presentations from what goes on in my household. I'm sorry, or you're welcome if you're a big Phineas and Ferb fan. Behold, should I use AI? Should I use a decision? I can't even read today, guys. This is bad. Should I use AI decision maker-nator? If any of you, I mean, I can't do the Doofenshmirtz voice. It would be great if I could, but I couldn't. I made this for you. This is yours now. This is a fantastic thing that you can now use. Super duper complex, and it's actually terrible. I made this in, what is that called? I made this in Lucid in 10 seconds because I thought it'd be funnier and get me more giggles than it actually did. So you're welcome. Stop it, Zach. Dang it. But right, I'm not advocating that just because you can't think of a good reason doesn't mean that you shouldn't, right? You have to put in the time for the thought exercise. I know we're not really big fans of thought exercises sometimes, but right, I'm going to go out and say something else potentially slightly offensive again. Yeah, we all work in security. You also work in risk. Everything funnels up to risk, right? That's the whole point of us doing security work, is to manage risk appropriately from a certain perspective. So if you want to use it. Great. Just be aware of the risk. If you don't want to, great. There are risks to that as well. Just be aware of those, right? There's going to be a lot of folks that are going to tell you, this is why you should use AI. This is why you shouldn't use AI. Do what's best for you. Advocate for what's best for your company, right? You just have to sit and think and consider what the impacts are going to be both ways, positive and negative, right? Missing out on benefits is a risk. So why should you use AI, or you want to use AI? No, let's take this perspective. It's a little bit less common of perspective, but it happens, right? Especially if you're in a more heavily regulated industry, government, right? At my company, we've added AI into our product the last year and a half. We've had a lot of people say, well, we wanted to use your product, but since you added AI, we can't. It was a bit of a wake-up call, and we've had a lot of, I can't even lie, pretty terrible discussions about it, but we've learned from it, and I think that's been good. So it's okay if you don't want to. You sure? Probably good choice, because you know what? Now there's a whole set of risks that you don't have to control for. It's not a silver bullet, right? A lot of people, like I said, there's going to be a lot more people saying this is why you should use AI because it's going to fix everything for you. It just won't. Anyone telling you that is, right, snake oil would be generous. It just doesn't work like that. So you're missing out on a bunch of risk that you would otherwise have to go learn about this new technology, get really proficient in it, and then say, okay, take a step back. How is this going to bite us in the butt later? Right, you're missing out on the benefits though, right? There's someone, I can't remember who, someone made the comparison once to the advent of AI being available to consumers, essentially being how the increase in literacy was the last 100, 200 years across the world, and said that if you're missing out on learning AI, you're going to be missing out essentially on what literacy, the popular literacy was going to be. I don't know if I agree with it to that point, but right, it's I think that something we can agree on is that AI isn't just going to disappear overnight, right? OpenAI, Anthropic, they're just not going to crumble and all the technology go away. There's just too much that's built on it right now. Not to say that it couldn't, but I think that's one of the less likely scenarios. Anyways, you want to use AI for real this time. Also, again, probably a good choice because there's a lot of good things that come from that. You just have to use it properly. Properly in quotes, right? There's no one right way to do that. If you know me, I like to say that, well, it depends, right? I'm one of those jerks. Everyone's adding AI, right? Everything's AI powered, whether it actually is or not. So take it with a grain of salt when we say we're AI powered. Sometimes they just aren't. But you have a lot to choose from now, which is great. Again, if that's something that's important to you, right? If you want to say, hey, we are AI supported by our vendors, we have integrated into our own environment for how we use our tooling. Fantastic. Great. Again, I'd recommend that you temper your expectations, right? This is just all kind of part of a generic risk assessment you'd be doing anyway. So take that into consideration. And for everything, for the love of anything good, right? Stop and ask yourself, okay, why do we want to do that? I'm going to say that probably 10 more times. You're going to be sick of me saying that, and you're going to hate that question, why, so much. But I think that this is the foundation of good governance, and I'm a GRC nerd. I said it myself, and other people introduced me as a GRC nerd, which I kind of took offense to. But I mean, I can't argue against it. I'm a nerd. So this is just good governance, is understanding why you're going to go and do something, right? There's a how and the what and everything that flows down from there. But if you can't answer why, you should probably take a step back before you end up stepping on. What's the thing that goes boom? Landmine. There we go. It's been a night. It was a day and a night yesterday, y'all. Anyway, so you want to use AI. You have these different ideas that you want to do. You want to integrate it into your environment. You want to let people run with ChatGPT. Great. Sounds like a fantastic idea. When you have the best of intentions, what could possibly go wrong? I should have grabbed the voice clip. The guy that does the voiceover for this is hilarious. Right. Unintended side effects is something that we got to think about, right? That's a big part of the whole underlying reason why we do risk assessments, right? Officially, unofficially, which brings us to main point number 2, right? If you don't know what you're using, if you don't know why you're going to use it and how that's going to support your mission, otherwise known as governance, how can you assess the risks to that mission, to how you plan to implement this, right? You can't do it. So again, nerd, sorry. Not really that sorry, but you have to have a good governance around why you want to use AI. Same thing with, right, 10, 15 years ago when cloud started to become a big thing, right? Everyone said, we're going to go cloud or we're never going cloud, right? It's the same conversation that we've had. You're just cutting and pasting the technology that's coming out, right? Have a good reason, have that documented, and that's going to make controlling what you want to do that much easier. It's not going to make it easy, but it's going to give you a lot clearer set of guide rails to say, okay, this is what we need to consider. This is what we need to figure out. We need someone to go figure out what the heck this technology is going to do for us. And then we can figure out how that's going to play into our strategy. All right, quick note on governance. It's the why. Again, told you, you're going to be sick of it. That's not the what or the how. Not that it's not important. It plays a part, just not in the initial setup of the governance strategy. All right, if you know why you want to use AI, it's a lot easier for you to figure out, okay, this is what could go wrong, right? If you're not using any sensitive customer data, if you know you have the contracts in place to say, hey, we're not going to train on any customer data, and you make that clear, yay, everyone's happy because the amount of data that's at risk is not zero, but it's less. Whereas if you're like, well, we could do this, we could do that, again, discussions that I know most of you have had internally, had with your vendors, it ends up just being a dumpster fire, for lack of better terms. Right. So you have to understand the why. You have to have it clear and common understanding for anyone that's going to be at the table having that discussion. And if you don't want to use AI, right, that's fine. You still have to have that in your governance strategy, saying we don't use AI because this and that, right? Because eventually someone's going to come up to you, and again, personal experience, both for me and probably for you, saying, hey, why can't I use ChatGPT to upload all of my financial statements to do the analysis for me, right? You remember what happened with Samsung? That was super fun. Samsung, please don't sue me. I love your stuff. Right. And you know why people don't like good governance? This was a totally irrelevant meme, but I was on a Jurassic Park kick. So, right. Life is otherwise going to find a way, right? If you say, hey, we're just going to waddle our way through and try and figure out what's going to happen, things are going to happen. So I'm actually going to recommend this. Sorry, Dr. Malcolm, you're wrong in this case, right? You're not just going to figure it out if you say, well, we'll see what happens. Bad things happen from that. Good things might too, but all right, I'm a risk-averse guy. I'm always going to recommend that you have some sort of insight and oversight to what's happening, so that if you do step on a landmine, if something comes and bites you, at least you're aware that that was a possibility. Right. What are we going to do about it? This is where I should say, hey, just go watch a recording of what Dave Kennedy was talking to us earlier, right? I mean, that guy's awesome and his presentation was great. Just go do it, right? I've had a lot of conversations about, hey, how do I do this? And that's tough because I have to be, again, that jerk that says, it depends. I can't tell you what to do for your company because I don't know what your company wants. So take an idea, figure out what you think is going to be good for that, right? And run with it. If it doesn't work, great. Now you know what not to do, and then you can go try something else, right? Ask questions. I know we're not always people in our industry, but there's no getting around it, right? The way that we've been trying to put ourselves out in the industry is that we're not a cost center. We are profit centers. We help drive revenue, right? All those fun, super fun business terms and having to essentially justify our existence. Who loves doing that? But we have to be people don't So ask questions, find the people that make the decisions or who have strong opinions, and figure out what needs to happen from there, right? If you don't have access to your CEO, your CTO, fine. Go ask someone that reports up to them and say, hey, what's our strategy for AI? What do you want to do? What are you hoping to see come out of this? Or what are you worried about if we were to do this? And a lot of times they'll give you the answer, and you're 80% of the way there at that point. Write some policies. Who loves writing policies? Stop it. You're all liars. All of you that have your hands up. I'm kidding. I'm again, one of those nerds. I like writing policy every once in a while. It doesn't have to be perfect the first time around, but if you don't start, you can't iterate and make a better process, right? So put down your thoughts, make an AUP, the acceptable use policy, say this is what we want to do. If it doesn't work out, great. You now know what doesn't work. Try something else. I totally forgot what this was supposed to illustrate, but let's assume and pretend that has something to do with working with other people, right? Tinker, learn about the technology. The more that you, like I said before, the more that you understand the technology, the better idea you're going to have about how to control for the risk that you're using, right? If you're not using any customer sensitive PII, then great. The EU AI Act doesn't apply to you, and you just solved a bunch of regulatory concerns. I'm not a lawyer. Again, I didn't give that disclaimer before, but I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to tell you whether or not that actually applies. Loose example. Right? People have to be trained. You have to know what is okay and what isn't, right? So write that down, put it out, get some feedback on that. Make sure that you have, all right, we're doing the basics. Make sure that things are inventoried, assess properly for risk. Make sure that you're including your third parties on that, right? Like I mentioned before, everyone's trying to add AI to their product. Make sure that you're okay with what they're doing with your data and how they're doing it. Sometimes it's cool. Sometimes, do I dare name names, right? You can think of some big names, you know, that we do. It's become a noun about how we do video conferencing or how we instant message each other in the office, right? There have been some not so stellar launches of AI features. Maybe check to make sure that you're okay with how your vendors are doing that. Don't be afraid to be bold and say, hey, look, like I know I've read enough of your terms of service that I know that you're using AI. And I'd like you to use, in terms that you use, to explain to a 5-year-old what you're doing with my data, how you're processing it. What does risk look like? And it depends. Right? There's all sorts of different ways to do that, including generating these really weird, trippy pictures of unicorns with sprinkles raining down from the sky, right? And they all come with different risks depending on what you're doing. Right? A lot of the concerns that end up coming with the territory doesn't mean it has to do directly with AI, right? If you look at a lot of the most recent AI breaches, a lot of the time it has nothing to do with the AI features or what's powering the AI features being breached directly. A lot of time it just means you had less than adequate application security, right? If you don't have good access control to AWS Bedrock where your AI features are running, that's not AI's fault. That's just basic access control. That's application security. So just because, right, that's why I do that overly reductive statement that AI is just software, that it makes it a little bit more attainable to think about, okay, well, this is just software. How do I secure software? How you secure specific software is a little bit different, but a lot of it's going to be it can be abstracted to a higher level. So think about availability, reliability, right? All the usual stuff. But if you take it from that generic perspective, like, hey, look, this is just software, you'll find the intricacies later. But if you don't do the basics, again, it's going to come back to bite you. Some recent AI breaches, right? There's this really cool story of someone getting, it was like a Chevy Suburban or something like that for $1. How cool would that be? Cars are just way too much now, y'all. But then it goes all the way down to consumer level attacks. I know that's not the right term, but for lack of better terms, not coming to my brain right now, right? Phishing isn't a new thing. Voice phishing, what do they call that? Vishing, right? That's not a new thing, but how they're doing it is new, right? So this is what I mean by we have to understand the technology, and that a lot of people are going to use an otherwise helpful technology for bad things. And as you understand how it can be applied, you get better insight into, okay, this is what we have to look into. This is how we protect against it. Right. And sometimes it means not having to say, hey, this is how we protect against AI phishing attacks by itself. Just understanding that, hey, this might change the volume. This might change the sophistication or the grammar of it, right? It could be little things like that, but understanding what the effects are gives you that insight. Again, I can't tell you how to do it, but the more you learn, the more you figure out, the better insight you can figure out how this ends up being a personal change for you. Which leads me to main point number 3. I think this is the last one. All right, don't reinvent the wheel. I said before, a lot of people say, hey, where do I start? I mean, it depends what you want to do. Again, I'm that jerk that says it depends. But there's a lot of people that have created a lot of stuff that you can start with, right? NIST AI RMF. Some of you are really big NIST fans. I'm a big NIST fan. Didn't used to be that way, but also that was more just a, hey, if you want to do FedRAMP, you got to fill out this really scary questionnaire, which scared me. ISO said don't use their logo, so I'm not using their logo. But you know ISO, right? They have a bunch of standards that I'll have a couple listed out. Whether or not you're an ISO fan, right? I'm not saying it has to be perfect, but it's a good starting point. All of these are just a starting point. And depending on how you use it, some of them might be applicable, some might not be applicable at all, right? If you're not integrating AI into your software, then you probably don't need OWASP. It doesn't hurt to read, right? Knowledge is power. And again, nerd, I'm not a lawyer. Thank goodness. A lot of really helpful lawyers said, don't do it, kid, when I asked them about law school, but read some regulation. I can't believe those words just came out of my mouth, but read some regulation. Look at, for instance, the EU AI Act, right? A lot of the law that tends to guide what we do ends up coming out of Europe. So, I mean, look at the EU AI Act. That was a terrible... Anyways, and the CAP AI assessment was brought out specifically to help people get compliant and prepared for the EU AI Act, which is going to be coming under enforcement soon. So read the law. Again, super fun. I know you hate it, but it'll give you a good insight into what regulators care about. Whether we care about what they care about is up to you, but I'm not a big fan of letting my company get sued because I didn't want to understand the legislation. So your mileage may vary. Just in word form, right? Word salad form, if you're more this way. I like pictures. Pictures are just easier for me to digest, even though I forget them. But this is just word form of what a lot of those standards are. Standards, frameworks, resources, right? Unfortunately, not all of them are free. I think the ISO ones, actually, the ISO standards are the only ones that aren't free, but take a look into them. Right? If you have, I can't remember how much it is after conversion. I think it's $200 on average per standard. But if your company's willing to spot you, that's a lot of information that can get you started. If you don't know a lot of the terminology that plays into enterprise AI, great place to start. And also, I'm like I said, sometimes we just have to be a big fan of people. There's a lot of organizations where you have working groups like the AISIC. I believe this is headed up by NIST. CSA has been doing a lot of stuff. The Cloud Security Alliance. They've been doing a lot of stuff. They have a handful, they actually have many working groups, like the AI Safety Initiative that they've launched and made it available for people. Contribute, right? There's no better way to learn than by doing, right? It doesn't matter if you don't know. A lot of people will be more than happy to share your knowledge and then say, hey, here's a project, please go do it. And then you learn a bunch of stuff that no one else knows about or very few people know about. Fun fact, I think I might have glossed over very briefly. For a while, I wanted to be a teacher. I just don't thrive in the public education system, and I wouldn't want to do that to students. I'm just not a good teacher, as you can see. But being able to explain things simply is a great way for you to understand where the gaps in your knowledge are. There's nothing more illuminating than doing that, right? And the more you know, the more you know. I don't think it'd be overstated how helpful it is to talk with folks, right? There's a lot of folks. These are some people that I've just had some recent conversations with. They've graciously agreed to have their faces plastered up here on the presentation. Both Henry and Walter are involved in the AI community in different ways, right? So Walter looks a lot more into AI governance and how to get that set up. He's got a consulting business around it, and Henry talks a lot more about vendor risk management, customer trust and stuff, but talks frequently about how AI can impact that. So please feel free to reach out to them. I found them to be really helpful and very open to talking with folks. So please feel free to tell them, hey, that you saw their faces at SAINTCON, and they'd probably be more than happy to talk with you. I got here a lot faster than I thought I would. Are there any questions, my friends? Right. Remember, my eyesight is terrible and my glasses are filthy, so you got to raise your hand and wave your hand around if you have something. I'm happy to talk to you outside. I'll be here all week and happy to talk to you in the halls as well. That's my favorite place to be. Here's my LinkedIn. If you feel like telling me that I have just terrible ideas and terrible presenting, I'll say I know. Thank you for the feedback. And if you want a copy of the slide deck for the resources down here, my friends, thank you very much, and I hope you have a very great SAINTCON.